So really, if you want to make an investor interested in your company, make a company worth investing in. The idea of bringing something from conception to exit is really a very special journey. Trust is one in the small moments. Trust is one in the little things that you do over time to show that you're listening, show that you're responding, show that you care.
Hey everybody, this is Harshit and welcome back to the channel at Just Great Podcast. And right now we've got Matthew, an amazing guest here. We've actually done a lot of to and fro conversation to get Matthew on this podcast, and he's actually the former CTO and co-founder at Final, which is getfinal.com, and it was actually acquired as well. So here we're going to dive into the story of startups and get those deep insights from Matthew. So Matthew, how are you doing, sir? And how are you feeling?
Yeah, I'm doing great. I appreciate you having me on the podcast. Have known of Daniel and heard of you before. Kind of been around the Y Combinator circles for a little while, and I'm really a fan of Daniel's last company. So I was excited to talk to you guys.
That's amazing, Matthew. I mean, YC, that's something we're actually going to get into as well. But my question, how do you know Daniel's previous company, like Dr. Chrono? Like, did you guys meet before? Or was it in a YC batch itself?
Dr. Chrono was an electronic medical record, practice management software, kind of a bunch of things around giving a digital presence to the medical record and patient management. And at the time, I was working for the National Library of Medicine, and I was helping my father and a friend build an electronic medical record product. Gist of it was that there was a pen with a camera on it, and it allowed emergency physicians to document their chart, but get a digital copy of that for free. And so because it had a camera and it would know what you were writing on the page, where you were, you could do a lot of quality control and kind of second guess the patient care, what was being documented. Did you do certain things? Like if it was chest pain, did you give aspirin? Did you do X, Y, and Z to make sure that you were billing at a certain rate, that you were ensuring that the standard of care was met for a particular patient presentation? Medicine's in my family. I was working in that space for a little while. I'm a fan of things that make people's lives better, and health and medicine are a big part of that for me. And I saw Dr. Chrono that was growing at the time. And at some point we were connected over email, just kind of in passing around the EMR space. And it wasn't until earlier this year, actually, that we met in person just randomly at a Y Combinator event. So I saw him, had been hearing about him through the forums and through the space, and just, fate brought us together a little closer.
Got it. I think that's how connections happen, right? For me, honestly, when I tried to force connections, it never really worked out. It was just that when I try to put something out in the world, when I try to make things happen, it just naturally flowed. So maybe we can discuss a little bit about, building connections and networking there as well. But I'd actually try to, just go back a little bit in your journey and maybe start off with the pen that you're actually talking about. I mean, to be really honest, Matt, the first question that actually pops into my head is, how did your device understand a doctor's handwriting? So that's one of my question there. So how did that work?
That's a good question. I think it wasn't my device. I can't claim any credit for it. There are a lot of these technologies out now. What it was a pen with a microdot pattern printed behind whatever it was on the document. So you might have, imagine just printing out a PDF form, like filling something out at the DMV or whatever. Think of the content of that piece of paper as being something as boring and rote as that. You're going to write in some text fields, you're going to check some boxes, you're going to do whatever. But because there is this dot pattern on the page behind that content, the pen could recognize a coordinate system behind that. So when you wrote a check mark, it could have a vectorization of whatever you wrote physically on the paper. It would transpose that into a digital record. And then because we had what was printed and what was written, we could match that up and then render it on the screen. And if you had an image of what was written and you had the coordinate system, you could mark certain fields as this was a checkbox. this was a text field. In the written content, it is important for patient care, it's important for patient records, but for the purposes of saying, did you run through, let's say, 10 standard checks in these 5 different systems within a particular type of emergency chart, then you could, without knowing what was written, have a good understanding of whether or not they've reached a certain level of care. Did they check this? Did they check that? Did they read in the affirmative this or that? And you could know, just because the provider went through all those things, they had done a certain quality of job in that particular patient encounter.
Got it, Matt. So in terms of education, like, was this what you're actually, learning? Was it like engineering? Because, this actually takes a lot of depth in understanding technology, right? And also understanding, I think there's definitely some sort of AI that must have gone into it. And I wouldn't just call it AI for the sake of it, because when you mentioned vectorization, was it like vector databases, converting the data into vector databases and understanding that data and then running that through an algorithm and then getting a proper subset of data from there? Was that something that happened? And did your education somehow help you in this? Or how did that happen? Like, I'd love to learn that.
Yeah, I think that we're giving me, maybe implying too much credit for me on this particular project. I really was helping to build things, doing a lot of installation. This was young in my career as an engineer, and I came
Got it.
academically up through a computer science degree. So I had kind of your classical programming training through higher education. But in coming into that, this helped me build software, helped me recognize software, helped me, because I grew up with computers, played tons of video games, built and broke computers throughout my teenage and college years, then putting these things together, physically installing them in hospitals, getting the software up and running, troubleshooting it when it went down. Those things were either skills that I had prepared passively for, or just kind of, got dropped into. But as we were building this, I mean, truthfully, there was no AI. This was a lot of cobbled together technologies that were solving a real pain point that didn't have a lot of good solutions in the marketplace at the time. And I think that is one lesson that broadly is important to recognize, is that it doesn't necessarily have to be perfect. It needs to solve a problem, whatever the product may be. It needs to solve a problem. It can be a painkiller, it can be a convenience thing, but if it makes people's lives better, if it cuts costs, if it improves the quality of something, especially in a place where the stakes of lower quality are really high, like in an emergency department or a healthcare scenario, then improving on some of these really important metrics, it makes a difference. It makes a difference to the bottom line, but it also potentially makes a difference to people's lives. And so that's one of the reasons where I like medicine. I like patient care. I grew up in that environment. As far as the software goes, I mean, there were a bunch of tools that just worked together well to solve an old problem better in a new way. I think those are the most relevant details. The vectorization stuff and all of that we can go into if you want to, but it might be a little bit outside the scope of things.
Got it. So when you were actually mentioning about early in your engineering career and just doing a CS after that, you mentioned something about just going hands-on with things and just trying to fix things. It sounds a lot like someone was really scrappy with things, just trying to get hands-on and just trying to get their hands dirty doing stuff. So was this like a builder's mindset that you always had? Because to be honest, Matt, I mean, I was a complete non-coder. I couldn't code. I couldn't write a single line of code. I couldn't build things. I mean, I was a builder in terms of marketing and sales and content, but I still had this knack of trying to build things. I mean, I broke my PSP, just to give you an example, I broke my entire PlayStation Portable. I ordered the parts on purpose and I tried to fix it by myself because I just wanted to. So I just have this mindset of, if it was built by a human, then it can always be rebuilt again. You can always do it. So is this something that you kind of relate to? Would actually love to dive in into this kind of specific mindset of founders, right? So what do you think?
I think in retrospect, yes. But I've always liked to dig into how things work. I broke lots and lots of stuff growing up on purpose or accidentally, just because I was a wild kid with not a lot of self-control. But I like to fix stuff too, and figuring out how things work. What was behind the stuff you were supposed to see that I always really liked. I love that you broke and tried to fix your PSP. Video games enabled so much for our generation. It's funny because I think that this builder's mindset and the scrappiness of it, but again, in retrospect, is something that I think that experience we were just talking about really, but it represents. I don't think it was the first time I experienced kind of pushing deeply into things and kind of doing maybe a little bit more than I should have in certain situations, but I got exposed to all sorts of different stuff. So when we built the medical record system, I would go into emergency departments, I would set up computers, install the software, train people on the stuff. I would run a support phone line, and emergency departments don't close. They're 24 hours a day. So I would get calls in the middle of the night, 2 or 3 a.m., and I would have to walk people through why their charting system wasn't working because they were trying to treat somebody who just got in a car accident and they wanted to be able to write the stuff down. And in the odd event where that happened, you had to pick up the phone. You had to deal with it. Sometimes you'd have to go in there and fix it. I think now if someone invited me to do that sort of thing, it would seem kind of absurd just because my life circumstances are a little bit different. But at the time, it seemed completely appropriate to just, at any odd hour of the day or night, be completely devoted to fixing whatever problem it was. It's funny. This is going to seem a little bit of a non sequitur, but I remember taking a support call from an emergency department in Maryland, and I was in the middle of cooking. For whatever reason, I was cooking a frittata. I have not cooked many frittatas since, which you might imagine from what I'm about to tell you, but I was on the phone, distracted by trying to help this doctor, and I just reached into the oven to grab a pan without an oven mitt, and grabbed the pan, the metal handle of the pan, got it just about to the countertop before I realized I was searing the skin on my palm, and then dropped the pan and said politely to the doctor, "I just burned myself. I'm going to need to call you back in a minute." Then I cleaned up the pan and called them back with some ice on my hand. But yeah, it was that sort of all-consuming, figuring things out wherever they come from is something that I think good founders do. And I'm not claiming to be a good founder, but I think that people who are willing to do any job that's on the deck, it could be literal sweeping, and it can be just helping people who need it, who really are people that you don't necessarily need to interact with on a daily basis, or you're hiring other people to take care of those things, like in customer support. As your company scales, oftentimes you'll have a team handling those sorts of different disciplines or just those sorts of needs. But if you're the CEO, for instance, getting on the phone or getting on a chat or just getting it physically in front of your customers is not something that you should shy away from, because it gives you a real deep understanding of what's happening in every aspect of the company. And I think all of my early jobs through to final, there wasn't really anything where I didn't want to touch some responsibility or some task or some technology at all. If you look at it the right way, is very interesting, and there's lots to learn, lots to do, and impact to make.
Good founders, right? It's so hard to put them in a box, like to categorize them. Okay, so this founder, they are good at this, or they're good at this, they do this. It's just so hard to put labels on them or put tags on them, because they can just do anything that they're given. They just go all in and just figure things out, like you said. So the mindset of figuring things out. So how helpful was it in applying and getting into YC? So that's a question that I have. And is this something that can be learned, or is it just natural to a human?
I think that might not be the question I would direct you towards. Mm-hmm. I think if you're asking about what it takes to get into Y Combinator, you're asking the wrong question. I think the more important goal is, what does it take to solve your problem and solve it well? And if it's the right problem to be solving, or if it's a worthwhile problem to be solving, you're probably not the only person who has it. But big companies have big, valuable problems, but most of the time, really big, valuable problems are problems that lots and lots of people have, or a smaller group of people have, but they're extremely painful, or a smaller group of entities. It doesn't necessarily even have to be a person. It could be an organization or something else, right? And Y Combinator is an organization that helps grow and scale companies. It helps ensure that the company has a better chance of survival and a better chance of meeting its mission. But they're a funding organization, right? Like Combinator is a number of funds. They're an organization of investors and they coach entrepreneurs to succeed, which makes the investment succeed. So really, if you want to make an investor interested in your company, make a company worth investing in, make a product worth investing in, make something that's worth scaling. And so growth, revenue, customer interest, those are the things that really you should be pursuing, and problem solving disciplines get you there. What problem are you trying to build for? Build a solution to that problem, define it well, define your solution, experiment until your solution gets better and is broadly successful at solving your problem. And then hopefully along the way, you're able to continue selling it and scaling that solution. But
got it.
Is the core question.
But understood, because I think that makes sense, because in the end, it just boils down to the fundamentals, right? The fundamentals are actually just solving problem and trying to monetize and scale that problem, so scale the solution so that you can serve a lot more people. And basically, that's when the investors come in, right? So what exactly does it take to find the right kind of problems to solve for? Because asking from the lens of the 2023, 2024 AI bubble, where everyone's trying to make an AI wrapper. But some rappers do have a lot of value. Some rappers don't. They die quickly with OpenAI, ChatGPT updates, right? So how do you think we can really find those actual problems to solve for? And what's your mindset? Or do you have like a roadmap or like data points that you can share?
Oh, I have no idea how to find the right idea. I have lots of ideas personally. I talk to all sorts of people who have ideas. I talk to all sorts of people who have problems. If you are a person who has an issue and it is unsolved, but there may be an opportunity there. That's not to say that solving your own problem is always the most successful way to build a big company or a really good product. But I do think that, and maybe this is one of the insights that I think I probably could offer, or at least some of the things that I subscribe to philosophically around this. If I'm going to be building a product, I'm going to be most successful at providing unique insights, really executing on it well, if a few things are true. One, I really care and like working on that problem. Two, it's a problem that I personally have some experience with. Maybe I've solved it. Maybe part of what I'm offering is guiding other people to a solution of their own for that same problem or something similar. Maybe I haven't solved it and I'm pursuing a solution to that problem. But the point is that I have an intrinsic understanding of that pain, of that problem space. I can really navigate it well. The other thing that I think is really powerful in building products is if you are your own user, which is slightly different from saying, have this problem, I'm solving this problem. At Final, we were a consumer credit card. It was birthed out of a really acute problem and an acute pain, which was the Target breach, the Home Depot breach, this rash of stolen credit card numbers that caused everybody's accounts to be shut down. So in a nutshell, we sought to build a breach-proof credit card, which is any sane person's response to a credit card breach. Build your own credit card company. So we did that, but the thing that really, I think, left an impression on me was that I used that product every day. Like, that was my top of wallet card. When I went to pay for something, I used the credit card that I was building. And when it didn't do something exactly the way that I liked, or I hit an experience that sucked, or I wanted it to do a little extra, then I went back to the office and I coded that thing, or I talked to my team, we designed it and we coded it that week. And all of a sudden, the thing that I wished just existed because I was using it. And so there's two things in that. One was there was a feedback cycle that was so fast because I didn't have to talk to anybody to get that feedback. I didn't need to say, hey, what's going wrong with this product? I felt it because I was using it every single day. And it was a common core part of my life. If you can build something that you are using every day to great effect, it's improving your life, there's a good indication that one, you're going to be able to continue iterating on it very quickly. And two, that it's something other people will use on a daily basis. And products that are used on a daily basis are products that you can scale. So the feedback cycle, I think, is a really big one. I will always advocate for having some kind of reference product that you're using on a daily basis personally if you're going to be building something that humans will use.
I think that's something that happened to me as well, because I tried to go into forums and look for problems, but I wasn't really successful in that. But when I was in Web3 and crypto, I was just trying to make these bots, right? I was just trying to make these bots for myself for like meme coin trading, or quantitative analysis on just understanding which meme coin is going to work really well. When I try to productize that, a lot of people bought it. So it was a lot of indie hacking that I've done. And from that, I understood that, first, you just get your hands dirty. You just go ahead, you just build it ASAP and get it up and running first. And now you can see there are these intricacies where you still need some kind of gaps to be filled in. And then you take it to the market, and then the market tells you a lot more that you didn't know about. And then you just keep iterating on that, like the feedback cycle that you said. And then you can deliver the ideal product that your end user needs. So I think that really makes a lot of things easier to understand from what you said. Try to break it down and everything. But so from the point is that you say, it kind of feels like you understand the core human motivation really well. Is that something that you are conscious about, that you understand the core human motivation, or the cognitive biases of humans and what exactly are the problems they're facing, or how exactly you can solve for their dopamine? If you get what I'm trying to say.
I don't feel like I'm an expert in any one of those things, though I find all of them very interesting. And I think being cognizant of bias, being curious about where your maybe opinions or experiences, or maybe just your perspective, are leading you astray or leading you somewhere different than someone else's experience and perspective may lead. Being curious about other potential routes, logical routes from where you're standing. But those things are valuable things to consider. I don't know that I have a particularly unique understanding of human motivation. I think humans are all motivated by their own things, and also some very similar things. And I think if you want to know what motivates people, you probably need to ask them, and whether or not you are doing that explicitly or you're observing their behavior in certain situations. I think there are a lot of ways to discover what people respond to. One thing that I am remembering in response to this question that I think is an interesting insight that I've always carried. Someone once told me that people don't really know what they want. And if you want to know what they want, you have to watch them. But with consumer products in particular, people, if you ask them, what features do you want, they'll tell you all sorts of things. But chances are, if you build those things, they won't use a damn bit of any of it. They'll use something completely different. Or they'll complain about it and they'll ask you to tweak it. And then the iteration is what gets you to convergence on the thing that actually matters. Very frequently, and I started but didn't finish the Human Computer Interaction Master's Program, and I learned some of this there, was observation of users, observation of the problems they're facing. Frequently, if you do enough observation, if you understand the problem space well enough, the solution becomes evident. And the solution is almost never what people ask for at the outset. So your question about human motivation, that seems like it's as much been a mystery to me as anybody else. I do think being disciplined about exploring problems in order to converge on a solution makes sense, is something that anybody can do. They just have to actually spend the time and be introspective about it, and really be somewhat rigorous about the exploration.
So now just coming back to the CS degree, right? Because I'm asking this from the perspective, because I was just reading an article where a lot of students who have graduated with a CS degree from UCLA haven't really gotten jobs, or they're really not able to get that employment, right? So what is the core problem right now in 2024 for whoever's graduating in their 20s, just starting off their career? So that's really something that's bugging me. I don't know how to say it, Matt. It's just bugging me, because if you have the skills, if you know how to solve problems, you will get hired, right? So what exactly is happening here? how was coding back then when you were trying to, use your tools? And now we've got Cursor, V0, Windsurf. There are so many AI coding tools right now, which can help you build anything so quickly and diagnose and solve those problems, right? So, what was the difference, and how exactly do you think a CS grad could navigate in 2024 and beyond?
So I have some thoughts on this, and also whether or not the difference between then and now is actually all that relevant. But I'm curious, what do you think the problem is? Like, is it one, a clarification? Are you asking why CS graduates are not getting jobs, or are you asking what should they be focusing on? Or is there something else that you're trying to dig into?
So, a slightly both. So, my question is basically, if you do have the skills, wouldn't you just get placed somewhere, right? Because from what I've seen is that if they've gone through the exact same course, if they have accumulated the same kind of skill set, why is that not being converted into something that can be monetized into?
So that's an interesting question. And truthfully, I don't know the scale of that problem. So I don't know the statistics on, let's say, CS graduates and what sort of jobs they're getting in what sort of job markets. I imagine it varies around the country. That varies by sector. It varies by the school you're coming out of. It probably varies by your gender and all sorts of other things that probably shouldn't be a factor in whether or not you get a job. I think that there's something else that I would comment on around that stage in life. And I think I have some thoughts around the difference between when I came out of my CS degree and now. One, there are, but truthfully, a lot of opportunities out there. I think if you're a technologist, you're in a great space. It is very unlikely, in my opinion, that you're going to have a completely dry job market or completely dry opportunity space in computer science or programming generally for quite a while now. Like the world runs on software, and it's going to continue trending towards running on software more and more and more. More systems are becoming programmable, and the mechanism for programming the systems is becoming more accessible, because now with AI, you're moving from an environment where you're programming in C to now an environment where you're programming in human language. You're programming systems with English and Spanish and Chinese and Italian, because you're interacting with conversational systems that act on your behalf. In a lot of cases, programming may be prompt engineering in the not too distant future. It is now for many systems and many teams. That is a non-trivial discipline. Whether or not that becomes a staple mainstream technique for decades from now, I don't know. The space is evolving really fast. But the point is that there are many opportunities, and the entry point for capturing or at least exploring these opportunities is, I think it's becoming easier to get to, not harder. I also would say that coming out of your CS program, or coming out of high school even, or whatever graduate like higher education program you're in, or are departing from, whatever your circumstances are, if you're in your late teens, early 20s, mid 20s, for a lot of people, this is a time where the stakes of taking risks are fairly low, and your ability to conjure passion and energy to spend tons of time and tons of enthusiasm on a single problem, it's just so much easier right out of college or during college, honestly. And whether you're a CS graduate or an English major or anything else, your ability to spend that sort of passion on anything that interests you when it comes to building is, I think, unique in that time in life. And I think that if I had any advice, it is the trite advice that if you're young, especially if you're in technology, to spend some of that energy, some of that time really taking some radical risks to imagine something that you dream should exist in the world, and give it your best shot on making that thing exist. Does not matter if you succeed. It matters more if you fail well. So try, fail, iterate, fail again, and continue doing that until you're proud of the things that you've learned. And that is all that matters. So I think that landing in a job, this is a path that everybody, I think, finds their own route to. I had my own route. I had plenty of things helping me along that road. I had lots of help from friends and family and networks and school and all of these things. I have tons of resources. Some people have them, some people don't. But one resource that you do have is effort. And I think if you're able to ask for help, either by surrounding yourself with people who have the sort of skills that you want to have, or have the sort of achievements that you want to have, and absorbing those things, or explicitly saying, hey, how did you get here? Or can you help me with this? Those are things that anybody can do. And when you're in a time, if you have the opportunity to take some risks and know that you have a place to land if you fall, take the risks. Take as many of them as you can. And when you get tired, go do something a little bit more stable, and you will have all the learnings from the risky moves that you've made to make that stable move a lot easier to get to.
Yeah, I think that's a lot to digest, honestly. I'm pretty sure, I was going to go back again once we finish the podcast, just listen to this segment, because I honestly felt that this is a segment which a lot of young folks would really, really find valuable. So thank you for those insights again, Matt. And now that we're actually into, kind of like the second half of the podcast, I'd like to dive deeper into more of like software that you said, and also maybe a little bit about your YC journey as well. Because yes, the world does run on software. And in terms of the CAGR of SaaS, it's growing massively, right? And now it's just becoming so much distributed that anybody can build software. Anybody can build software in natural language, like you said. And that's something that I've been trying to do as well since the day OpenAI released the 3.4 November 2022. I've always been trying to prompt engineer, like, we try to call the new tag, with prompt engineering, if we like to call it. But, just trying to communicate with systems, understand and how to build this out without writing, single line of coding, all of that. So, tell me about your understanding of fintech, and also maybe a little bit about the acquisition journey, because from what I've read is, when you do acquire your startup, you have, as founders, you go through this mental space of, okay, what next? This was a hell of a journey. So what next? Is that something that you actually had? Sorry, it was a lot of questions that I asked, but feel free, to dig in whatever you feel like.
Yeah, I would say that Y Combinator was a memorable experience and provided a ton of value during the program, and an enormous long tail value just in the network and continued availability of resources through Y Combinator. So the biggest thing is that you're joining a group of founders that have gone through a really intensive experience. There's a lot of camaraderie built just out of that shared experience. It is grueling to build a company, even a little bit more grueling to do it in the term of Y Combinator, because you have a compressed time frame where you really need to generate progress and show it, and generating the illusion of progress doesn't do it, because at the end of the program, you still have to raise, still have to build your company. The goal is survival and success. And just being in the program does not guarantee you that. It does give you focus. It does give you resources and advice, other founders to lean on, just in terms of the shared journey. Honestly, it helps in a lot of the same ways as athletics does. I would say that Y Combinator and a lot of these other incubators, in a lot of ways, turn building a startup into a team sport. There's a competitive aspect to it, but there's also a shared struggle, which is extremely helpful when you really have to pick yourself up and just keep going, because it's not easy. I would say that, it's a 3-month program where you go in there and you're working on basically nothing but talking to users and building product and reporting on metrics and solving problems and iterating. And that's your sole focus the whole time. And for the pleasure, you get some investment, and you have to present your progress at the end of the 3 months. And that culminates in demo day. You present to a bunch of investors, and hopefully you've shown enough progress that you're generating some revenue and you get some interest from some folks who want to help you grow. A lot of companies do have that outcome. Some companies don't. Some companies take a little longer and they're able to raise. Some companies, they go a different route. They get acquired. They shut the company down. They join something else. They decide they want to go a different direction. There's a lot of different things that happen. And none of those are wrong or bad outcomes necessarily. They just are the course of that particular journey. I would say that if you have a chance to do Y Combinator once, it is something that I would advocate. I mean, if you don't need it, if you've been through the ringer on the startups, but then giving up the equity for the investment, maybe that's not something that you need to do. For me, I think it is. It is a transformative journey for a lot of people. It is a really valuable resource and community, and I would do it again given the choice.
Got it. Got it. So what's the networking like there? Because there's a reason why it's in San Francisco, right? So were you always living in San Francisco, or were you outside somewhere else in the States? And how different was it? You know, just being in SF and absorbing all that founder energy. Is there a different kind of energy that you get in SF? What happens there? So why is that like a cohort of innovation?
I don't know. I don't live in San Francisco. When I went through Y Combinator, it was in Mountain View. So in 2015, I went through, and the headquarters of Y Combinator were in Mountain View. They just moved kind of from their original place to their second building in Mountain View. And I'm messing with you a little bit on the San Francisco thing, but truthfully, like, that is a city that's super interesting, but I'm not sure what the magic of San Francisco specifically is. But what I will say that I've noticed is every place seems to have a spirit to it, a prevailing narrative, a topic that people just can't get away from. I lived for a long time in DC area, and in DC, every place you go to, you hear about politics and government, and it is the seat of power of the United States. You hear that, you feel it. You just in passing, you are able to observe the behind the scenes happenings of Congress and the executive branch. You just catch that stuff because you're in proximity to it. What I noticed when I first moved from Maryland out to Mountain View in 2015 to help a buddy with his startup, not for final. I actually moved in 2012 initially. I noticed that all the stuff that I saw on Hacker News, or that I saw when I was just seeing ads on Google or whatever, I would see these companies, and then I'd walk down the street and the company's name would be on a building right next to me. I'd be like, these things I see on the internet, they're real and they're here and they're physically present right in front of me. This is where the internet is. And then I'd go to a restaurant, or I'd hang out with friends, and the prevailing thing that you would feel and talk about and hear about here was startups and tech companies and innovation and dreams and people wanting to build the future. And that spirit is really strong here. So in my view, that the inertia behind that idea, people building dreams with technology, it's super strong here. It's embedded in this place. And I don't think that that's really changed too much. I do think it's pollinated elsewhere in the United States and elsewhere in the world. But this place still thrives on innovation. It still has a lot of really, really smart people with really powerful dreams and a lot of enthusiasm to pursue them. And I think that has leadership. It's not an insignificant thing. It really means that a lot of those people are going to go off and attempt to change the world. But yeah, I think that is one of the things I think is special here. Leadership.
Got it. And that's true, right? I mean, even the slightest idea of trying to change the world, working on something that's bigger than you, that gives you some kind of intrinsic motivation, right? You just have to go ahead and just go ahead and do it. So, yeah, I think that's true, because it really just comes down to, again, human motivation, which is, of course, curiosity. We as a species, we are curious. We just have to explore what's outside of the planet, what's on the moon, right? So we are built that way, and curiosity is something that we always have to have, right? So that's true there. And now wanted to share a little bit about your acquisition journey. So how long was your journey there, from building to the acquisition? And so how did that happen? How was the conversation like? Because my company, which is called Artifin, was actually a micro acquisition, which was acquired on acquire.com. And it wasn't a big acquisition, of a big scale acquisition there, but that actually did give me a lot of understanding of the whole cycle of startups and everything. But would love to learn more from you on how your journey went.
Yeah, and I mean, congratulations to you. the idea of bringing something from conception to exit is really a very special journey. Going full cycle, building an organization, generating revenue, getting customers, solving their problems, and eventually going to some kind of exit. If it's an acquisition, if it's an acqui-hire, if it's a shutdown when that's appropriate, whatever it may be, like bringing it from start to finish really is a unique privilege, being able to do that. So congratulations and good on you for doing that whole journey and for encouraging other people to go through it, because I think it makes a difference in the world. I think our journey was interesting, and we started in 2014. We built the company and were ultimately acquired in 2018 officially. So we were alive for about 4 years before the acquisition. It was interesting. We were a consumer credit card product. We just kind of stepping back in terms of what we built. So when the Target breach happened, when the Home Depot breach happened, my co-founders and I all had our cards canceled, and that was extremely frustrating. The aftermath of that, resetting all the cards, dealing with the credit card companies, talking with the banks, being essentially pushed aside as not all that meaningful and certainly not unique human beings treated with respect. None of that stuff sat right with us, and leaders felt we did have to do something to change it for ourselves and for other people. This was kind of a unique period in time where Google had recently released application-specific passwords. So there was this notion of dynamic security, dynamic credentials around different entry points. When you have a credential that gives you access to some valuable central source of data, then giving dynamic credentials to the different parties that might access it just makes sense. The credit card is a good analog to that, where you have your credit card account. Anybody who has that number has equal access to transact with that account with some constraints, right? But if you have the number, you can charge me. If they have the number, they can charge me. You both have access to my whole credit line. You can wipe out my open to buy, my ability to spend. That seems insane, right? Like, why would you do that? Why would you ever give out your credit card number? Our thought was, let's do application-specific credit passwords for credit cards. Let's generate as many numbers as you want, give one number to each merchant, and then we're going to lock the numbers to the merchant. So you give your number to Amazon. If somebody takes that and tries to use it at Target, we lock the card to Amazon, we block the Target purchase, and we let you know somebody's got your card number. You might want to change that one out, but your physical card number, your Netflix number, all these other numbers are unaffected. So it's just kind of a quick switch out. And even if you decide you don't want to switch it out, chances are you're not going to lose anything anyway. And there were some intrinsic budgeting features that went with that. You knew exactly what you were spending at every merchant because every merchant had a unique card number, and we were able to break that stuff down very easily for people. So there were some great financial management features that we were able to build with almost zero incremental effort. We focused a lot on customer experience. We really wanted to be something that people love to use because we were using it, and we built something that we enjoyed using, and we figured that we were going to do the same for our customers. There was a lot of advocacy for customers that I think motivated the things that we did at Final. Even though we started with a security focus, I think the thing that really drove us on a day-to-day basis was customer advocacy in the financial space. That was not something that really had a lot of presence in fintech at the time. It really was about dollars and cents. It was never really about experience and human feeling in any real way. So my co-founders may feel differently, but that's the thing that drove me to build every day. I think that through that, we did a lot of things. We built a customer portfolio. We explored business features. We explored co-branded card offerings. We explored working with large brands. We eventually explored getting acquired in a number of different avenues because we were kind of weighing our opportunities for true growth. Were we going to be able to hyperscale, or were we really looking at a plateau? And I think the way that we built the company, the way that we scaled, the way that we funded debt, scaling was hard. And so we did look for a little bit of an acquisition route. We could have held on, but I think we really wanted to scale through partnership. And so we looked that route. And what ended up coming out of those efforts was we talked to a ton of people. And one of the people that we talked to was Apple. And I don't know this for sure, but ultimately Goldman acquired us to launch the Apple Card. And I have a sneaking suspicion that some of the conversations we had with Apple may have influenced the feature desires that they had because we were a pretty unique offering in the marketplace, and virtual cards and consumer experience and the security aspects of the product are things that are deeply embedded into the Apple Card today. So it was interesting. I had pre-existing relationships with Apple and with Goldman, and those both kind of materialized into an opportunity to work together on something really exciting. And we got the conversation started and ended up just kind of building together until it made sense for us to join.
Got it. Yeah, I think that's true because Apple's also big on privacy. That feature 100% does definitely make sense. So also, was this before the iCloud masking passwords? Because, maybe that could also be a little inspired by, understood. So even this feature about masking your...
I think it's natural. I am going to hesitate that we had any influence on that, but I think that this is like, there's this whole world of privacy and control in personal data. Like, this is an expansive concern. And whenever you have something that is very personal and data centric, there is a consequence to sharing it. And if that's your email address, if that is your password, if it's your account information, if it's a descriptive identifier of you, if it's a social media post, if it's something that gives access to information, or if it's something that gives explicit access to an account of some kind or some other avenue of control, like, there's a consequence to that because you can give it out, you can't really pull it back very easily. One remedy for that is obfuscation. You give, instead of giving your real account, you give something that's a surrogate, and you can turn the surrogate off. Your real account stays still hidden behind that and active and untouched. That really is an elegant solution to this problem of not being able to rescind the permissions you've granted to people out in the world. And I think that doing that with credit cards makes sense. Doing that with your OAuth accounts, like your Google account or your Facebook account, those things make sense. Doing it with your email address makes sense. People are now doing that with bank account numbers. There's anything where you think you could give you're kind of relinquishing a little bit of control and autonomy, there probably is a mechanism where you could claim that back by providing some surrogate in place of the real thing.
Yeah. And I think this part of the conversation is actually full circle into our first segment where we mentioned about problems, right? Because solving problems actually opens up a lot more problems to solve for, right? So credit card was a problem, and now we've got masking, and I think it's just an endless loop of the universe. I think that's how it functions, right? You always have problems to solve for, and you just have to observe, understand. And I think it's sitting right there. You just have to focus, and then you'll definitely be able to come up with ideal solutions that can, be really impactful there. But now I just have this one question about the transition between the medical space and the fintech space, because you're into these industries where you just can't make any mistakes, right? So because there's so slight chances, right? Here you have to ace every single time. So it may be finance or healthcare. So how do you navigate these spaces? Because that's very critical, right?
Leadership. Yeah, I would clarify that you can absolutely make mistakes, and there's no way to avoid them. The question is, how do you how do you mitigate the risks, and how do you recover from mistakes? In fintech, one of the things that's really important is trust. In medicine, to a certain extent, I would say trust is a factor. There are people who have better thoughts on this than me, but medicine is an interesting one because it's a bit of a limited space in terms of who your consumers are and where you can go as a consumer to get what you want out of the medical industry, right? You don't have that many choices of doctors. You don't have much in the way of choice around medical records or how your data is being handled. That space right now is still very locked down in a way that I think doesn't really serve the consumers in an optimal way. So the consumers don't really have a lot of choice but to trust. But in fintech, trust is a major thing. In order to use a new thing, people are going to need to trust that it's going to do something good for them and not do something bad, because people are very scared about their financial lives being disrupted in some way. And I think that that's a relevant concern. Leadership, you can absolutely make mistakes though, and you can recover from them. And I think the act of recovering from a mistake, recognizing recovering from a mistake and doing it well, is a generator of trust. Because if you hear feedback from users, you respond to it, well, you get more feedback, and you make sure you're headed in the right direction. I think that that is how you generate trust. And actually, there's I was recently going through Brene Brown's book, Dare to Lead. And I think that's a great book for any of your listeners who are building companies. I think anybody generally, especially if they aspire to any sort of leadership, it's a good human leadership lesson, just compilation of them, fantastic stuff. But she talks a lot about trust. And she says trust is won in the small moments. Trust is won in the little things that you do over time to show that you're listening, show that you're responding, show that you care. And I think that but really intrinsic in that is making mistakes and responding to them. If you make a mistake, that sucks, but actually that's a learning opportunity. And it is an opportunity to show the people who are watching that you care about getting better and that you're paying attention to the impact of your mistakes. And I don't think that's limited to fintech. I think that that is something that is an opportunity everywhere to generate trust. The other thing is that I will say that there's a massive difference between fintech and honestly a lot of health tech stuff, at least when you're talking about things like medical records. It's a massive difference between that and something that's truly mission critical and zero error tolerance, right? There are spaces where that is true. If you're talking about delivering like tightly dosed medication in an embedded system, that is medicine that really cannot tolerate errors. If you're talking about aerospace, that is a place where you probably can't tolerate errors outside of a certain margin. But again, there's margins. So I think the question about mistakes is really about risk tolerance, the scale, the cost of those mistakes, and what your margin for error really is. And at some point, really, it's an engineering question. What's your margin for error? How do you engineer so that you're within that margin with your solution, and that if you do fail, that you have the mitigating things in there to make sure that nothing happens that's too bad. And if you do make a mistake, you, again, recover from it well, and you win the trust back and you get better.
100%, because without trust, societies collapse, right? Trust is a very, very important thing. It's just the fundamentals of how we've built things around us. And Matt, and now that we are in the final segment of the conversation, we've actually, spoke about a lot of things, your understanding, your journey, your curiosity, and, even your acquisition journey, learning about YC. In this last segment, I'd love to know how you would navigate the AI space. Maybe just a couple pointers on that would really be helpful, Matt, because from someone from your mindset and understanding, I think there are some valuable insights on this. So how would you navigate the AI space in the coming years?
I would pay attention to it for sure. It would I'd involved in taking advantage of the things that AI has to offer as quickly as you can. I would say that that is an extremely broad question. So depending on how you want to get involved, if you're a consumer of products and you want to figure out how you leverage AI, start Googling how you can use AI in certain aspects of your life where you're curious if it's applicable. Log on and use ChatGPT, use Claude, talk to it about something. It doesn't matter what it is. Ask it about, let's say, some problem you're trying to solve, something you're trying to reason through. Try and write a blog post and get some help with it. If you're trying to do a task, see if you can find a way to have AI make that task easier for you. I think that if it's a digital thing or a thing in the digital realm, you're going to have an opportunity today to do that. If it's a thing where you're dealing with atoms, it's in the physical world, there may be a way to do that. There may not be an easy way to do that. But I think in the future, there's not going to be a place in your life where you can't be assisted by intelligent systems of some kind. If you're building a company in the space, I think one of Sam Altman's repeated statement is, and he said this recently, is really true. I would not bet against the progress of AI. I think that if you're assumption is that AI is not going to be able to do something, and you're building a company because you think that that's going to be a permanent gap in the abilities of intelligent systems, I think that you're probably going to be disappointed at some point. Is it going to be now? Is it going to be soon? I'm not sure. Depends on your assumption. But if you assume that, let's say, GPT-4 is not good enough at writing something or coding something, I wouldn't assume that GPT-5 and GPT-6 wouldn't be good or wouldn't fill that gap faster or more impressively than you're expecting. I think that the rate of progress is astonishing, and we should assume that AI is not good at something today, it will be good at it tomorrow, for a given definition of good. So if you're building a product, if you're building a company, I would try and ride that wave. I would not try and assume that there's going to be a weakness that you need to fill.
100%, Matt, because right now, whatever we have right now, it's the worst it can ever be. And yeah, it's just growing at an exponential space. Yeah, looking forward to what you've got in your journey next. And anywhere you think we can help out, definitely do ping us. We're always here to help you out here, Matt, again. But yes, it was an amazing conversation again.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you guys. It was fun talking to you, and I enjoy this type of stuff. So if it's helpful or I can offer anything to you or your listeners, please give me the opportunity to assist. I like seeing if I can contribute something, and love to talk to you again. Thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely, Matt. Thank you again. And thank you everybody for watching this episode, and hope you guys learned a lot from this.